Leah, sweetie, be a dear, and just fill in the details on this donation card for me, will you?" My mother Patricia's voice was smooth as silk, but the request was a shard of glass. We were at the Boston Law Club's annual gala, the air thick with the scent of old leather and ambition. She handed me the pen in front of judges and managing partners, my colleagues. In that one gesture, she hadn't asked for help. She had assigned me my role, the family secretary. My name is Leah, and this was my family's annual tradition of putting me in my place. I'm 28 years old. By day, I'm a public defender, fighting in overcrowded courtrooms for people the world has forgotten. It's draining, thankless work that doesn't pay well, but I believe in it. I believe everyone deserves a voice. To my family, however, my career isn't a calling. It's an embarrassment. My father, Frank, is a retired judge, a man who built his reputation on the very laws I now use to defend the destitute. My mother, Patricia, chairs 3 different high society charity boards raising money for the arts and historical preservation noble causes that never get their hands dirty. And then there's my sister, Olivia. Olivia is 2 years younger, a newly minted partner at one of Boston's top corporate law firms. She is the golden child, the star, the one who did everything right. She's brilliant, beautiful, and ruthless in a way our parents admire, mistaking it for strength. My older brother Tyler is a lawyer too, stuck in a mid-level firm, constantly trying to catch up to Olivia's shadow, always echoing our parents' opinions because it's the easiest path. In our family, success wasn't measured in lives changed. It was measured in dollars earned and headlines secured. Olivia's 6-figure bonuses were cause for champagne toasts. Her name in the business journal was framed and hung in my father's study. Last year, when I cleared a man who had been wrongly accused of robbery, a man who would have lost a decade of his life, I called my father to tell him the news. I was so proud, my hands were shaking. "That's nice, Leah," he'd said, his voice distant. "But that kind of work doesn't exactly pay the bills, does it?" 2 weeks later, Olivia helped a tech giant avoid a few million in taxes, and my parents threw a dinner party in her honor at this very club. The invitations called it a celebration of her remarkable legal mind. I wasn't invisible to them. Worse, I was a disappointment they had to manage. The daughter with a prestigious law degree who chose to waste it on people who couldn't pay. I watched them from across the room, my own family. My father was holding court, telling some story to a circle of admirers, his voice booming with the authority of a man who's never been questioned. Olivia was at his side, smiling radiant, the perfect accessory to his legacy. My mother moved through the crowd like a queen, greeting everyone her social grace, a finely honed weapon. I took the donation card my mother had given me and walked over to a small empty table by the window. I filled it out, my handwriting, neat and precise. But I didn't write down a donation amount. Instead, I just held the pen, staring out at the Boston skyline. Years of this. Years of being the footnote in Olivia's story. When she made law review, I was the one they called to help her move into her new apartment. When I passed the bar, my father said, "Good. We expected you to." They'd paid for Olivia's entire Ivy League education without blinking. I'd worked 2 jobs to get through law school, with a mountain of student debt they told me was character building. Their logic was a pretzel twisted to justify their favoritism. Olivia needed their support because she was destined for greatness. I didn't because, well, they never finished the sentence. Because I wasn't. A waiter approached my table, his expression sympathetic. "Can I get you anything, ma'am?" he asked quietly. "Just water, thank you." I could still hear my family's laughter from across the room. They were so comfortable in this world, so certain of their place in it, they didn't see me hiding in the corner because, to them, I was already there. I was always in the corner of their lives. A quiet, reliable, and deeply inconvenient reminder that not all of their children had turned out perfect. And as I sat there, the familiar ache of being overlooked started to harden into something else, something colder, something that felt for the first time like resolve. I handed the card back to my mother, and she took it without looking at me immediately, turning to show my father the name I'd written. "See, I told you Leah would handle it. She's so reliable." The word reliable felt like a cage. I was just about to make my escape when Olivia's voice cut through the noise. "Leah, perfect. We were just talking about you." She walked toward me, my father and Tyler flanking her like bodyguards. My mother followed, completing the circle. I was surrounded. "I have the most wonderful opportunity for you," Olivia said, her smile bright and predatory. Her firm Harrison and Croft had just taken on a high-profile pro bono case. A group of factory workers suing a massive corporation for unsafe conditions. It was a classic David versus Goliath story, the kind that wins awards and gets glowing write-ups in law journals. "It's a huge case," she continued, "and the research is overwhelming. We need someone to handle the initial discovery, sift through a few thousand documents. It's the kind of meticulous, justice-oriented work you love, right?" I saw the trap immediately. The grunt work, the thousands of hours of tedious, unpaid labor that no one at her high-priced firm wanted to do. They didn't want my legal mind. They wanted my free time. "You want me to do free research for your firm's PR campaign," I said flatly. My father frowned. "That's a cynical way to put it, Leah. It's a chance for you to be part of something important." "And a chance for Olivia's firm to look good," I added. "Everyone wins," Tyler said with a shrug. "The firm gets good, press the workers, get their day in court, and you get to, contribute. Contribute. The same word they'd used when I paid for my brother's car repairs, when I'd co-signed my cousin's student loan." I looked at their faces, a united front of expectation. This is how it always worked. In families like mine, everyone is assigned a role. It's rarely spoken, but always understood. There's the golden child, the one who carries all the family's hopes and ambitions. That was Olivia. She was the star, the success story, the proof that their parenting had worked. Then there's the black sheep, the one who carries all the family's disappointment. That was me. Olivia's successes were the family's successes. My choices, my quiet life defending the poor, were my failures. And this dynamic, this unspoken system, it requires maintenance. The golden child must always be validated, supported, and celebrated. The black sheep must be reminded of their place, either through criticism or, more subtly, by being assigned the role of the helper, the one who exists to serve the needs of the star. My mother placed a hand on my arm. "Think of it this way, honey. It will be a family project. All of us working together for a good cause." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. This wasn't about a family project. This was about Olivia's resume. I wanted to say no. Every part of me screamed it. "No, I have my own cases, my own life. No, I will not be used." But I looked at my father, the retired judge, whose approval I'd chased my entire life, and saw the familiar set of his jaw. I saw the warning in his eyes. Don't make a scene. Don't be difficult. People ask me all the time, "Why don't you just say no? Why don't you just walk away?" What they don't understand is that a prison doesn't need iron bars when the walls are built from a lifetime of quiet dismissals, of subtle manipulations, of the constant gnawing fear of being completely and utterly alone. You learn that fighting back, that making a scene, only brings more pain, more lectures, more proof that you are the problem. So you learn to survive. You learn to swallow your anger, to quiet your own needs. It's a grim calculus, the survivor's math. You calculate the cost of rebellion versus the cost of compliance. And for years, compliance had always been cheaper. It wasn't weakness. It was a survival strategy learned in a prison with no visible walls, a cage built of conditional love. Fine, I said the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I'll do it. My mother's face flooded with relief. Olivia's smile became genuine. Wonderful, she said. I knew we could count on you. I'll have my assistant send over the files tomorrow. Thousands of them, I'm sure. They moved away then, their mission accomplished already, talking about dinner reservations, leaving me standing alone by the window. I hadn't been a part of their conversation. I had been an agenda item. And now that I was handled, they could move on. I watched them laugh and mingle my family and felt a chasm open up between us, wider and deeper than it had ever been before. The next 3 weeks were a blur of caffeine and case law. Olivia's assistant had, as promised, sent over the files, thousands of them. Digital mountains of corporate documents, safety reports, and internal emails that I had to climb alone. I worked late into the night, my small apartment lit only by the glow of my laptop, my own cases pushed to the back burner. I lived on cheap takeout, fueled by a grim sense of duty. This was my contribution, my family project. When I finally sent my research summary to Olivia, a 60-page document outlining a clear path to proving corporate negligence, her response was a single text message. Thanks. Got it. I didn't hear from her again for a week. Then I saw an article in a local law journal. Harrison and Croft takes a stand for the little guy. It quoted Olivia extensively praising her firm's commitment to justice. She mentioned the exhaustive research her team had done. Her team. I felt a familiar, bitter taste in my mouth. I had been erased from the narrative completely. I was a ghostwriter for my own family's glory. Fast forward another 2 weeks. The Boston Bar Association was hosting its annual charity auction. It was the kind of event my father insisted I attend to network, though he really meant it was to be seen and judged. I went not with the hopeful anxiety of the gala, but with a weary resignation. I made my obligatory donation, got a glass of cheap wine, and found a quiet corner to stand in, hoping to remain invisible. And that's when I heard it. My sister's name. 2 older lawyers were standing near me, talking in low, impressed tones. Did you see that preliminary brief Harrison and Croft filed in the Northwind Industries case? Absolutely brilliant. My stomach twisted. Her case, built on my sleepless nights. The other lawyer nodded. That argument about subsidiary liability, it's a game changer. Whoever dug that up deserves a corner office. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk over and say, that was me. I'm the one who spent 3 days buried in legal archives to build that argument. But I didn't. I just stood there, my wine glass cold in my hand, listening to them praise my sister for my work. It was the story of my life. Leah, isn't it? A man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a sharp suit approached me. I recognized him immediately. Arthur Davies, a senior partner at Rivington, and Cole Harrison and Croft's biggest rival. Yes, I said, surprised he knew my name. We met briefly at the Law Club Gala a few weeks ago, he said. I saw your name on the donation list. It's good to see young lawyers supporting the community. He was being polite, making small talk. I braced myself for the inevitable question about my father or Olivia, but he surprised me. I have to say, he continued, his voice lowering slightly, I was incredibly impressed by that brief your sister's firm submitted on the Northwind case. I had my associates pull it. My heart started pounding. He was talking to me about the case. It was a masterpiece, he said. The argument on corporate negligence drawing a direct line from the parent company's board minutes to the safety failures on the factory floor. It was groundbreaking. You should be very proud of your sister." I just nodded, unable to speak. "But here's the thing," he said, leaning in a little closer. "The core research, the foundation of that argument, it didn't feel like Olivia's usual style. It was deeper, more relentless. It felt like the work of someone who actually fights in the trenches." I held my breath. He couldn't possibly know. "I know you're a public defender, Leah," he said, his eyes studying my face. "But have you ever considered corporate law? A mind like that is wasted in the public sector." Rivington and Cole is always looking for talent, for lawyers who can see the angles others miss. The kind of person who could put together a brief like that. He thought I was my sister, or rather, he thought the work of my mind belonged to her. The offer hung in the air, a shocking, impossible opportunity, born from a lie I had never told but had been forced to live. I stared at Arthur Davies, my mind a mess of contradictions. He was praising my work, the very essence of my legal mind, but he was attributing it to a lie. It was the most validating insult I'd ever received. He saw me, truly saw my style, but he was looking at the wrong piece of paper. I found my voice, keeping it steady, professional. "I'm incredibly flattered, Mr. Davies, truly. But my heart is in public defense. I'm not sure I'm cut out for the corporate world." It was the perfect, polite refusal, the one my family would have expected, the one that reinforced their narrative of me as the unambitious, less driven sister. He nodded, a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "A shame. The world needs fighters in the trenches, it's true. But the money and the resources are in the towers. If you ever change your mind, my door is always open." He handed me his card and walked away. I stood there for a long moment, his words echoing in my head. Fighters in the trenches. That's where I lived. In the grimy, underfunded, overlooked trenches of the legal system. He saw it. A man I'd spoken to for less than 5 minutes saw my core identity more clearly than my own family had in 28 years. They saw my work as a waste, a charity project. He saw it as a fighting style. The seed of confidence he'd just planted wasn't just a feeling. It was an idea, a dangerous, brilliant, terrifying idea. I didn't sneak out of the party this time. I walked. I walked right past my father, who was laughing with another judge. I walked past Olivia, who was accepting another compliment about my brief. None of them noticed me leave. I was as invisible as I'd always been, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a curse. It felt like a superpower. The drive back to my apartment was different. The usual post-family event, fog of resentment and sadness, wasn't there. In its place was a cold, sharp clarity. My work. Olivia's case. The workers. Arthur Davies was right. The money and resources were in the towers. Harrison and Croft had them. But the fighters were in the trenches. And I was the best fighter I knew. The corporation Olivia was defending Northwind Industries thought they were fighting a well-funded but ultimately predictable corporate law firm. They weren't prepared for a street fighter. They weren't prepared for someone who knew how to turn a lack of resources into a weapon, who knew how to find the one tiny crack in a mountain of corporate lies. They weren't prepared for me. And Olivia, she had given me the perfect cover. She thought I was her ghostwriter. She had no idea I was about to become her ghost. The idea took root, growing from a seed into a plan with breathtaking speed. My research for her had given me a map of the enemy's territory. I knew their arguments, their weaknesses, the documents they thought were buried. I had given her a sword, but I had kept the shield for myself, and I knew exactly where to strike. I got home, unlocked my door, and walked straight to my laptop. I ignored the blinking light on my phone, the inevitable texts from my mother, asking why I'd left early without saying goodbye. I opened a blank encrypted document. For a long time, I just stared at the blinking cursor. Then I began to type. The first person I needed to contact was the lead attorney for the factory workers. I'd seen his name in the initial case files. A man named David Chen, a solo practitioner out of a small office in Dorchester. He was outgunned and outmanned. He needed help. He needed a fighter. And I needed a cause that was truly my own. I wasn't just going to fight this case. I was going to win it, and my family would never see it coming. At the top of the document, I typed out the title of my new secret project. It was simple. It was perfect. The Silent Indictment. The day the Northwind Industries case went to court, my family arrived like they were attending a coronation. My father Frank looked every bit the retired judge, his posture rigid, his expression stern, as if he were presiding over the proceedings himself. My mother, Patricia, wore a Chanel, suit her pearls, a subtle armor. They sat in the front row of the gallery, a silent, powerful show of support for their golden child. Olivia was a vision of corporate power at the plaintiff's table. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. Her suit was tailored to perfection. She exuded a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Beside her, the rest of the Harrison and Croft team looked equally polished, a phalanx of expensive lawyers ready for a slaughter. They were so sure they were going to win. And why wouldn't they be? They were representing a multi-billion-dollar corporation. On the other side of the aisle sat David Chen alone. His suit was rumpled. His hair was slightly askew. He looked tired, David, against a team of Goliaths. My family barely glanced at him, dismissing him with the casual cruelty of the powerful. I sat in the back of the courtroom, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. No one had noticed me slip in. To them, I was just another anonymous face in the gallery. Just Leah, the public defender, probably here to watch and learn from her brilliant sister. Little did they know, the past month had been the most intense of my life. Secret meetings with David Chen in his cramped Dorchester office. Late nights spent poring over the real documents, the ones I hadn't sent to Olivia. We built the case together brick by painstaking brick. David, with his years of experience and deep knowledge of labor law. Me, with my insider's map of Northwind's corporate labyrinth. I had handed Olivia a well-crafted, but ultimately superficial, argument. I had handed David the keys to the kingdom. The judge entered a stern-faced woman named Judge Albright, and the room fell silent. "Counsel, are we ready to begin?" Olivia stood, her voice clear and confident. "Ready, Your Honor." Harrison and Croft for the defendant Northwind Industries. David stood as well. David Chen for the plaintiffs. "Your Honor." My father leaned over and whispered something to my mother. She smirked. They were so certain, so comfortable in their power. They thought this was just a formality. The opening statements began. Olivia was flawless. She painted a picture of Northwind as a responsible company being targeted by a frivolous lawsuit. She cited the documents I'd given her, building an argument that was strong on the surface but hollow at its core. It was a beautiful performance, a magnificent lie. I had to give her that. Then it was David's turn. He approached the lectern slowly. "Your Honor," he began, his voice quiet but firm, "this case is not about a frivolous claim. It's about a company that repeatedly and knowingly put profits before people. It's about a pattern of negligence that we are prepared to prove not just through company policy, but through the direct words and actions of its executive leadership." Judge Albright looked at him, her expression unreadable. "A bold claim, Mr. Chen. I hope you have the evidence to back it up." "We do, Your Honor," David said. "In fact, our entire case will be presented by the lead counsel who developed this argument. She is the architect of our strategy. A murmur went through the courtroom. Lead counsel. Everyone thought David was a solo act. Olivia exchanged a confused look with her team. My father leaned forward, frowning. And who would that be, mister? Chen, the judge asked. David turned his head slightly and looked directly at me in the back of the room. The plaintiffs call Leah Henderson to the counsel table. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved. The only sound was the low hum of the courtroom's air conditioning. Then I stood up. The scraping of my chair against the floor seemed to echo like a gunshot in the silence. Every head turned to the back of the room to me. I felt their stares like a physical weight, 100 pairs of eyes filled with confusion, curiosity, and from the front row, a dawning, horrified recognition. I began to walk. Down the center aisle of the courtroom. Every step was a choice. Every footfall on the worn marble was deliberate. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at my family. I saw my father's face, a mask of disbelief hardening into fury. He was a judge. This room was his temple, and I was committing sacrilege. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with the social horror of it all. This wasn't just a legal proceeding anymore. It was a scene. And then I looked at Olivia. I could see the moment the pieces clicked into place for her. The brief I'd written. My presence here. David Chen's strange confidence. It wasn't confusion on her face anymore. It was pure, unadulterated betrayal. It was the look of a queen realizing the pawn she'd sacrificed was about to take her throne. I reached the front of the courtroom and stood beside David Chen. This wasn't an act of revenge. Not really. It was an act of justice. Not for the workers, not just for me, but for the truth. "Good morning, Your Honor," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I thought it would be. Leah Henderson appearing for the plaintiffs. The room erupted in whispers. Olivia shot to her feet. "Objection. Your Honor, she's my sister." Judge Albright peered down from the bench, her expression one of deep curiosity. "Is this true, Miss Henderson?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Olivia is my sister." Then there is a clear conflict of interest. Olivia sputtered, her composure finally cracking. She was consulting for our firm on this very case. "Was I?" I asked calmly, turning to face my sister for the first time. "I was never retained by Harrison and Croft. I never signed a contract or an NDA. I was asked as a family member to provide some pro bono assistance. I was asked to contribute. And I did. I provided a very thorough summary of the publicly available information." I turned back to the judge. "What my sister doesn't know, Your Honor, is that 2 days after she asked for my help, I was formally retained by Mr. Chen. The research I provided to my sister was, shall we say, a foundational overview, enough to build a competent but ultimately flawed defense." I let that sink in. I could see my father's face turning a dangerous shade of red. The full exhaustive analysis, I continued the deep dive into their offshore subsidiaries, the connection between their board minutes and their safety violations, the argument that Mr. Davies found so relentless. That work was reserved exclusively for my actual clients. The word relentless hung in the air, a gift from Arthur Davies, a final perfect twist of the knife. Olivia looked like she'd been physically struck. She sank back into her chair, her face ashen. Her lead partner was whispering furiously in her ear, but she wasn't listening. She was just staring at me, staring at the sister she thought she knew, the sister she had used, the sister who had just handed her a beautiful, perfectly constructed Trojan horse. "Your Honor," Olivia's co-counsel stammered, standing up. This is completely unethical." It's sabotage." Judge Albright held up a hand, silencing him. She looked from me to Olivia, then back to me. A slow smile spread across her face. "Counsel what your opponent does with her family on her own time is not my concern. But what she does in my courtroom is. And this," she said, her eyes gleaming, "is highly irregular and absolutely fascinating. Please proceed, Miss Henderson." The story spread through the Boston legal community like a virus. It didn't need a newspaper headline. It traveled faster through hushed phone calls between partners, through shocked emails, between associates, through gossip, shared over lunch at the stuffy downtown clubs my father frequented. The Henderson v. Henderson Showdown, they were calling it. The tale of the public defender who took down her corporate superstar sister with an ambush of pure, cold legal genius. My silent indictment strategy became the stuff of legend overnight. Some called it unethical, others called it brilliant, but everyone was talking about it. I went back to my small office and tried to work on my actual cases, but the calls wouldn't stop. Lawyers I barely knew called to congratulate me. Old professors from law school reached out, their voices a mixture of awe and confusion. Arthur Davies sent a one-word email, relentless. But the real storm was happening in a world I was no longer a part of. My family was imploding. Uncle Michael called me, his voice strained. "Leah, your father is. He's not handling this well. He hasn't left the house. He won't answer his phone." "That's not my problem, Uncle Michael," I said, my voice tired. "It is your problem when you're the one who set the fire," he shot back before hanging up. The fire. That's what they saw it as, an act of destruction. They couldn't see that I hadn't set a fire. I had simply held up a mirror, and they were horrified by the reflection. The real pressure, I knew, would be on Olivia. She was the public face of this humiliation. Her firm, Harrison and Croft, was in damage control mode. Their high-profile pro bono case had turned into a PR nightmare, exposing them not as champions of justice, but as users who'd been outsmarted. I imagined the emergency board meetings, the frantic calls, the partners demanding that Olivia fix this. And Olivia, my sister, the golden child who had never failed at anything, was now the architect of a public disaster. Her entire career had been built on an image of perfection, of effortless success. This was the first real crack in her armor, and it was a canyon. I knew she wouldn't retreat. Olivia didn't know how. She would attack. She would try to reclaim the narrative. I just didn't know how she would do it until Thursday. I was leaving the courthouse when my phone buzzed with a notification from a legal news site. The headline made my blood run cold. Olivia Henderson to give exclusive interview on Court of Opinion podcast addressing family controversy. Court of Opinion. It was the biggest legal podcast in the state, hosted by a charismatic but ruthless former prosecutor named Marcus Thorne. He was known for his tough questions, for not letting guests off the hook. Going on his show was a massive gamble. If you succeeded, you could reshape public opinion in your favor. If you failed, he would tear you apart on air for an audience of 50,000 listeners. Olivia was walking into the lion's den. And she was doing it willingly. I clicked the link. The episode was scheduled to air live the next evening. The show's promo read, "Point, a family torn apart by a high-stakes lawsuit. A story of betrayal, ambition, and sibling rivalry. Olivia Henderson tells her side of the story for the first time." Her side of the story. I knew what that meant. It meant she was going to paint me as the villain. The jealous, unstable, vindictive sister who had planned this all along to destroy her. She was going to use my history of being the difficult one, the black sheep, as proof of my instability. She was going to try and win in the court of public opinion what she was about to lose in a court of law. I leaned against the cold stone of the courthouse wall, the city noise fading around me. The battle wasn't over. It had just moved to a new arena, and I had to be ready. The next evening I was in my apartment, a glass of wine I couldn't taste in my hand. My laptop was open on the coffee table, the podcast's homepage loaded. The live broadcast was scheduled to start in 5 minutes. I should have turned it off. I should have gone for a walk, done anything else, but I couldn't. I had to hear it. I had to know exactly how she was going to burn me down. The show's intro music, a tense, dramatic score, started right on time. Then came Marcus Thorne's voice, smooth and confident. "Good evening, Boston, and welcome to Court of Opinion. Tonight we have a story that has captivated the city's legal circles. A family drama playing out in a federal courtroom. Betrayal, ambition, and a sister versus sister battle for the ages. We're joined tonight by Olivia Henderson, partner at Harrison and Croft, who is here to share her side of the story. Olivia, welcome." "Thank you for having me, Marcus." Olivia's voice was warm, but I could hear the carefully controlled tremor underneath. She sounded like a victim. It was a role she'd perfected since childhood. "Let's get right to it," Marcus said. "Your sister, a public defender, ambushed you in court, revealing she was secretly working for the opposition in a case your firm took on pro bono. How did that feel?" Devastated. Olivia said, her voice catching just enough to sound genuine, absolutely devastated. "Not because of the legal strategy, but because this is my sister. My family has always been incredibly close, and to have her do this publicly, it's been heartbreaking for all of us." "My family has always been incredibly close." The lie was so audacious I almost laughed. "Tell me about your sister," Marcus pressed. "My listeners want to understand the dynamic here." "Leah has always been passionate," Olivia said, choosing her words carefully. "She's brilliant, but she feels things very deeply. She's had some struggles over the years, and my family, we've always done our best to support her. But she has a tendency to see slights where none are intended. She can be a bit dramatic." There it was, the foundation of her argument. I wasn't a wronged party. I was unstable. I wasn't fighting for justice. I was throwing a tantrum. "So you're saying this legal ambush wasn't a strategic move, but an emotional outburst?" Marcus asked. "I believe so," Olivia said sadly. "I think she felt overlooked, and this was a way to get attention. A very destructive way, but attention nonetheless. We invited her to help with the case, to be part of this wonderful pro bono project. We wanted to include her, and somehow she twisted that into an opportunity to betray us. I gripped my wine glass. She was good. She was taking my actions and reframing them through a lens of pity. She was painting a picture of a loving, supportive family dealing with a troubled, ungrateful daughter. But Marcus Thorne didn't get his reputation by accepting easy answers. "Let's talk about that pro bono case," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "Your firm took it on to, in your words, give back to the community. But the legal work, the foundational research, was done by your sister for free. Is that correct?" "We asked for her help, yes, as a family project. But you didn't pay her." Marcus cut in. "A 60-page legal brief that my sources say was brilliant. You took that work she did on her own time while managing her own caseload and presented it as your firm's achievement. Is that ethical?" "It was a family matter," Olivia began, but her voice faltered. "Because it seems to me," Marcus continued, his voice like silk-wrapped steel, "that you used your sister for free labor on a case that would bring your firm positive press. And now you're surprised that she's upset about it." The line went quiet for a moment. I could picture Olivia in the studio, her perfect composure starting to fray. I could picture my father listening at home, his jaw tightening. "My sister and I had an understanding," Olivia finally said, but the confidence was gone from her voice. It was the first crack in the dam, and I knew Marcus was just getting started. An understanding Marcus Thorne's voice was deceptively soft. "So, your understanding was that your sister, a full-time public defender, would donate hundreds of hours of her expert legal analysis to your multi-million-dollar firm, and in return you would put your name on her work and not even offer to cover her expenses." "What a generous family you are." Olivia was silent for a beat too long. "You're twisting things," she finally said, her voice tight. "This isn't about ethics. This is about my sister's emotional state. She is lashing out, and she is using this case to do it." "Is she?" Marcus asked. "Or is she simply tired of being used? You talk about supporting her, but my sources tell me your family has a history of this. A pattern. One daughter who gets everything, and another who is expected to be grateful for scraps. Is that an inaccurate description of the Henderson household, Olivia?" I could hear the sharp intake of her breath over the broadcast. He knew. Someone had talked to him. Maybe Arthur Davies. Maybe someone else. It didn't matter. He knew the truth, and he was laying it bare. That is a gross oversimplification. Olivia snapped her polished veneer, finally cracking. "My parents have been incredibly generous to both of us. But some people, no matter what you give them, will always see themselves as a victim." There it was, the final pivot. She was casting me as the professional victim, the eternally ungrateful black sheep. It was her last desperate play, but Marcus didn't let it go. "So the workers, in this case, the ones your firm is supposedly helping pro bono, are they also just seeing themselves as victims?" he asked, connecting the dots with surgical precision. The trap was set, and Olivia, blinded by her own arrogance and rising panic, walked right into it. "Honestly," she said, and I could hear the sneer in her voice, "yes. Some people are meant to lead, and some are meant to follow. Those workers made their choices. They should have known their place instead of trying to blame a successful company for their own poor decisions." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. They should have known their place. It was the quiet part spoken out loud. It was the core belief of our entire family. The philosophy that justified their hierarchy, their entitlement, their dismissal of me. It was everything. "And your sister Marcus?" asked his voice, a quiet, deadly whisper. "Does she also need to know her place?" The dam broke. All the years of resentment of seeing me as less than poured out of her in a torrent of unfiltered rage. "My sister is a public defender who makes $50,000 a year and thinks she's changing the world," she spat her voice, dripping with contempt. "She's jealous. She has always been jealous of my success of my life. This whole courtroom stunt wasn't for justice. It was an attention-seeking tantrum from someone who couldn't stand to see me get another win. She wanted to make my moment about her. That's all this is." Silence. Marcus Thorne didn't say a word. He let her tirade echo in the dead air. He let every lawyer, every judge, every potential client in Boston hear the raw, ugly truth of who Olivia Henderson really was. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost gentle. "Well, Olivia," he said, "you've certainly given us your side of the story. Thank you for your time." The show's outro music swelled, cutting off whatever she might have said next. I sat on my couch, my wine glass forgotten. My hands weren't shaking. I felt calm. She had done it. She had handed me a confession on a silver platter. Before the podcast was even over, my phone began to buzz. It was a Twitter notification. Someone had already clipped the audio. The 30-second clip of Olivia saying they should have known their place, followed by her rant about my jealousy. It was posted with a simple caption, "The real Olivia Henderson, I guess." I watched as the retweets and likes started to climb. 10, 50, 200. It was a digital wildfire, and my sister had just struck the match, doused herself in gasoline, and danced in the middle of it. The silent indictment was no longer silent. It was a roar, and it was about to consume them all. The internet doesn't forget, and it doesn't sleep. By the time the court reconvened the following Monday, Olivia's 30-second rant had been viewed over 1 million times. It was a digital bloodbath. News outlets had picked it up. Commentators dissected her every word, her tone of contempt, her casual dismissal of working-class people. The hashtag #KnowYourPlace was trending, and not in her favor. The narrative she had so carefully tried to craft, that of a loving sister dealing with a troubled sibling, had been obliterated. In its place was a portrait of an elitist entitled corporate lawyer who had on a public broadcast confirmed every negative stereotype about her profession. The atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. The jury filed in, and not a single one of them would look at the Harrison and Croft table. Olivia sat ramrod straight, but her face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Her lead partner kept shooting her furious glances. My father and mother were in the gallery again, but they weren't sitting in the front row. They were huddled in the back, looking smaller, older, like they were trying to disappear. David Chen and I didn't have to do much. We presented our final pieces of evidence, the internal memos I'd found that proved Northwind had ignored their own safety inspector's warnings for years. The documents were damning, but honestly, the case had already been won. It had been won in a soundproof podcast studio on a Friday night. Olivia Henderson had, in her desperate attempt to discredit me, become our most effective witness. When David gave his closing argument, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply laid out the facts, concluding with a quiet, powerful statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, "this case is about choices. Northwind Industries chose to prioritize profits over the safety of its workers. And Harrison and Croft, in their defense of this company, chose to dismiss the very people they claimed to be helping. The evidence is clear. But if you have any doubt about the culture of contempt at the heart of this case, I urge you to ask yourselves a simple question: do these workers deserve justice? Or should they, as Miss Henderson so eloquently put it simply, have known their place?" He sat down. The silence was absolute. Olivia's face was ashen. The jury was out for less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman handed a slip of paper to the clerk. I held my breath. David put a steadying hand on my arm. The foreman stood, cleared his throat, and looked directly at us. "On the charge of corporate negligence, we, the jury, find for the plaintiffs." A gasp, then a wave of sobs and cheers erupted from the workers sitting behind us. We had won, completely. The foreman continued reading out the damages they were awarding. It was a number that would not only compensate the workers for their suffering, but would also serve as a stinging punishment to Northwind Industries. But Judge Albright wasn't finished. After the jury was dismissed, she looked down at the Harrison and Croft table, her expression like carved granite. "Counsel," she said, her voice cutting through the celebratory murmurs, "I would like to add a note for the record. In my 20 years on this bench, I have rarely seen a firm conduct itself with such a stunning lack of professional ethics and basic human decency. You took on a pro bono case not for justice, but for publicity. You exploited a family relationship for free labor, and when your tactics were exposed, you went on a public forum and disparaged not only your opponent, but the very people you purported to serve." She looked directly at Olivia. Miss Henderson, your behavior has been an embarrassment to this court and to the legal profession. This court will be filing a formal complaint with the State Bar regarding your conduct. This hearing is adjourned." She slammed her gavel down the sound, echoing the final brutal collapse of Olivia's world. I didn't look at my sister. I couldn't. Instead, I turned to the workers, to the men and women who were crying and hugging each other, their faces filled with a relief so profound it was heartbreaking. This victory was theirs. I had just been the architect. The silent indictment had finally been read out loud. The fallout was not a single loud explosion. It was a slow, creeping rot. The empire my family had built, an empire of reputation, of influence, of the carefully curated image of Boston legal royalty, didn't fall. It dissolved. For my father, the punishment was 1,000 tiny cuts. He was a man who lived on the currency of respect. Suddenly his accounts were empty. Old colleagues would see him at the club and give him a tight, pitying nod before turning away. The invitations to sit on judicial review panels stopped coming. His name was quietly removed from the masthead of a prestigious law journal he'd advised for a decade. He was no longer Judge Frank Henderson, a titan of the law. He was just the father of those Henderson girls. His legacy, the thing he had spent a lifetime building, was now a footnote in his daughter's public, messy war. For Olivia, the end came swiftly and formally. A certified letter arrived from the State Bar of Massachusetts, informing her she was under official investigation for professional misconduct. 2 days later, the managing partners at Harrison and Croft, the men who had toasted her ascent to partner just months before, called her into a meeting. There was no argument, no discussion. She was suspended indefinitely pending the outcome of the bar's investigation. They couldn't fire her outright. It would look like an admission of guilt, but it was a death sentence all the same. They stripped her of her corner office, her cases, her 6-figure salary. She who had built her entire identity on being the winner had lost everything. Her career wasn't just stalled. It was a smoking crater. My mother's collapse was quieter, but no less complete. Patricia lived for her social standing. Her life was a carefully arranged tapestry of charity boards, fundraising galas, and society luncheons. Within a week of the verdict, the calls started. First, the chair of the Boston Symphony Gala Committee called to say they thought it was best if she stepped down this year to avoid any distractions. Then the Historical Preservation Society. Her proudest achievement requested her resignation from the board. Her friends, the ones she lunched with every Tuesday, suddenly had scheduling conflicts. The invitations that filled her calendar simply stopped. She was a social pariah, her name tainted by scandal. She had spent a lifetime polishing the family name, and now it was a stain she couldn't wash away. Even Tyler, who had only been a background character in this drama, felt the shrapnel. His firm, which had clients who ran in the same circles as my father, suddenly found him to be a liability. He was taken off major accounts. His partner track, already a distant dream, evaporated completely. He was just another Henderson part of a family that had become a cautionary tale. I heard all this through the grapevine, through whispers from old family friends who now called me, their voices filled with a new cautious respect. They wanted to share the gossip to align themselves with the winning side. I listened politely, but I felt no joy, no satisfaction. There is no victory in watching a house you once lived in burn to the ground, even if you were the one who exposed the faulty wiring. I went back to my life. I went back to the trenches. I represented a single mother facing eviction, a teenager wrongly accused of shoplifting an elderly man whose benefits had been unfairly cut. Their cases didn't make headlines. Their victories wouldn't be discussed at the Boston Law Club. But their gratitude, the look of relief in their eyes when I told them they wouldn't lose their home, that their son was coming home, that they could afford their medication, and that was real. It was a currency my family had never understood and would never possess. Their wealth was built on image, and when the image shattered, they were bankrupt. My wealth was built on something quieter, something more durable. And as their world crumbled, mine felt for the first time completely and unshakably solid. They had lost everything they valued, and I was finally free to build something that had actual value. Of course, winning the case brought a flood of offers. Law firms that wouldn't have given me the time of day a month ago were suddenly calling, offering partnerships, six-figure salaries, the very things my family had always valued. I could have stepped into Olivia's world, taken her place in the towers. I could have bought a bigger apartment, a fancier car. I could have played their game and won, but the victory had left a hollow space in my chest. Revenge, it turned out, was a cold and empty meal. The money from the settlement sat in my bank account, a number so large it seemed unreal. I thought about what to do with it, and my mind kept going back to my mother. I didn't have many memories of her, just flashes of a warm smile, the scent of lavender, the feel of her hand holding mine. Margaret, her old friend, had told me she was a nurse, a helper, someone who spent her life caring for others, who had been worn down by my father's constant dismissal of her worth. He had erased her just as he had tried to erase me, and I realized what I had to do. This wasn't just my victory. It was hers, too. I didn't buy a new condo or a luxury car. I took that money, all of it, and I went back to David Chen's cramped little office in Dorchester. We sat across from each other, surrounded by stacks of legal books and files. I want to start a foundation, I told him. A nonprofit legal aid fund specifically for low-income workers caught in labor disputes. People like the ones we just fought for. David listened, his expression thoughtful. That's a noble goal, Leah. But it's a monumental undertaking. I know, I said. But it's what I have to do. The world has enough corporate law firms. It needs more fighters in the trenches. I slid a piece of paper across his desk. On it, I had written the name. The Elizabeth Henderson Justice Fund, he read aloud. Your mother, yes, I said, my voice thick. She was a nurse. She spent her life helping people. My father spent his life taking. I want her legacy to be the one that lasts. This was my real closing argument. My family had built an empire on a foundation of status and reputation, and it had crumbled into dust the moment the truth was exposed. I would build my legacy on a foundation of justice service and my mother's quiet strength. It wouldn't make headlines in the business journal. It wouldn't be celebrated at the Boston Law Club, but it would be real. It would last. My father had called me worthless. He had called me a cash cow. He had seen me only for what he could take from me. But he had been wrong. My worth wasn't in the money I could provide. It was in the fight I was willing to lead. As I walked out of David's office that day, having set in motion the creation of my mother's fund, I didn't feel the thrill of victory or the satisfaction of revenge. I felt something deeper, something that felt for the first time in a very long time like peace. I had taken the poison they'd given me my whole life, and I was finally turning it into medicine. The sign on the door is simple, just engraved glass. The Elizabeth Henderson Justice Fund. Inside the office is small, but it's clean and bright, with large windows that let in the afternoon Sunday. I'm sitting across from a young woman, a waitress, who's been unfairly fired for reporting a manager's harassment. Her hands are shaking, her eyes are full of a fear I know all too well, the fear of being powerless. I listen to her story not as a lawyer, but as a person. And when she's finished, I look at her and say, "It's okay. We're going to fight this. You're not alone anymore." And in her eyes, I see a flicker of hope, a hope that had been extinguished. And I realize this is it. This is the legacy. This is the victory that matters. My story is over, but maybe yours is just beginning. This is for you. It's for you if you've ever sat at a family dinner and felt like a ghost, present in body, but completely invisible. It's for you if you've ever had your accomplishments met with a polite nod while someone else's were met with a parade. It's for the ones who were told they were too sensitive when they were just hurting, too dramatic when they were just asking to be seen. This is for the quiet ones, the reliable ones, the ones who learned to swallow their own needs because it was easier than fighting for a space at the table. If you've ever been made to feel like you are on the fringes of your own family, like a supporting character in a story that should have been yours too, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. I see you. Your worth is not determined by their approval. It is not measured by their celebrations or their dismissals. It exists solid and unshakable within you, whether they choose to acknowledge it or not. For years I believed my value was conditional. I thought I had to earn it to prove it to be useful enough to deserve it. I thought their definition of me was the only one that mattered. They were wrong, and if you feel that way, you need to know they are wrong about you too. The world might have assigned you the role of the black sheep, the one who is less than. But what I've learned is that the black sheep are often the ones with the most strength. They are the ones who learn to survive in the cold, who find their own way when the flock leaves them behind. They are the ones who learn to build their own warmth, their own shelter, their own family. Being on the outside doesn't make you less. It makes you a survivor. Your journey may not involve a courtroom or a dramatic showdown. Your victory might be quieter. It might be the moment you stop hoping they'll change and start changing your own life. It might be the decision to invest in your own dreams instead of their expectations. It might be finding a group of friends who see you, truly see you, and celebrate you for exactly who you are. It might be the quiet, brave act of building a life so full of your own joy and purpose that their opinion of you becomes nothing more than a distant, irrelevant noise. You don't need their permission to be worthy. You don't need their invitation to celebrate your own life. Your story is yours to write. Let it be a brilliant one.